Hey friends, it's Rob and I'm super excited to present an entire quilt project in today's tutorial. That's right, we are going to do Jackie Kunkel's Mountains and Plains quilt that you see on the design wall. I'm super excited because it's fun, easy, fast, simple, and you're gonna love it. Are you ready? Let's get started. Welcome back everybody. That is right. Welcome to So Well. I am your host, Rob Appell from Stitchin Heaven out in Quitman, Texas, and I am super excited to see all of you on the other side of the camera there today. We're gonna do Jackie Kunkel's amazing quilt. This is called Mountains and Plains, and it is super easy, especially if you treat yourself to one of these laser cut kits. And we're gonna get into that in just a second, but let me slow down a little bit. Let me slow down and remind all of you, if you're enjoying these videos from us all here at the Stitchin Heaven YouTube network, please subscribe, hit the little bell to be notified. We are trying to do our best to put out at least one video a week, if not two. Lots of fun education and travel and all that kind of good stuff. So as we're diving into today's full quilt tutorial with all three blocks covered, I just want to encourage you to help support us by hitting that subscribe button. And like I said, this quilt kit that I'm going to show you here, don't hate me, but it's kind of limited edition. This was something that we did for one of Jackie's special events. Jackie is one of our educators, teachers. She does a bunch of travel. She's got a wonderful YouTube channel. We've done a sewing space video with her. We've got a wonderful interview with Jackie. So get to know Jackie. She is wonderful. She is full of energy. She loves nature, fitness, all that stuff. So she's my new best friend, by the way. So anyways, if you get this kit here, what you normally will get is not only the pattern and the fabric, but if it says on the front, pre-cut, what that means is everything is exactly that. Look at this, everything is pre-cut and they're packaged and they're all individualized and they're wonderful and they're labeled, and it is super easy to work with. So at any rate, you can get these kits. There's a link in the description below. After we go through all of these kits and we are sold out, we will just go ahead and put the yardage in the box and you can cut your own strips to follow the pattern. That way we can get caught up with the production kind of thing. So anyways, I want to just point out some of our kits, limited edition or pre-cut. The rest will just be the yardage you need to follow along. This is also a scrappy project, and that's what I did for mine. Following Jackie's pattern, I just went through my stash real quick because I didn't want to cut into the, or dive into the pre-cut kit. We'll put that back into inventory for one of you. So our first block we're making, and we are going to need 36 of these total to make this center of the quilt, right? It's basically kind of a half log cabin. So normally a log cabin would have a square in the center, and we would build all four sides kind of in a windmill fashion, working usually clockwise, not that that matters so much. But today we're kind of approaching this with just half of the log cabin. So it's even simpler, and the cutting instructions in the pattern is just fantastic. So when you first go through, this is going to give you all the information you need right here. So just cut these strips and do what I've done, as you can see here. Go ahead and just stack them up and kind of randomly stack them, because that's one of the fun parts about this project, is all of the strip piecing and all of the block construction is very random in your color choices. So at any rate, here's your information for that. Also, just be aware, you have template pieces. We can also cut these with rulers. I'll show you that when we get on to block 2 and 3. But let's, like I said, dive right into construction. Very fun, very easy, but I know we've got some new quilters out there. So I want to cover one of the problems I hear about every now and again, and that is getting our blocks and everything to line up nice as we're sewing. So cutting number one is important, but you know, look I've got a little bit of slop to my block here. Things have been folded, things have been packaged for a while. So before I even go over to the sewing machine, I'm gonna take a moment and I'm just gonna press both of my pieces. Now, in theory, both pieces should be cut, my square and my rectangle. Oh, and by the way, all of these strips are the same exact width. Of course, I'm not telling you the numbers because I want you to support Jackie and get her pattern. That's the way we do it sometimes around here. But again, all of these strips are the same width. They're just going to change length as they go around our square. So in doing this and in following the pattern, it actually starts at the bottom, but you can see my square and my rectangle are the same length right now. So as I lay them right sides together, the first thing is I want to kind of just pre-match them up before I head over to the sewing machine. Then as I get over to my sewing machine and I get ready for my 1/4 inch seam allowance, there's two things we're looking at. We're looking at the new width of the block we're creating, but we're also looking at, does it stay square and does it stay skew in our last few stitches? So first of all, I'm watching that little bit of green fabric right along that outside edge there as my 1/4 inch foot. You can probably see the number 1/4 on the stitch plate there. That is my calibrated 1/4 inch. I know right where it's at. It doesn't move. Okay, now the last thing I didn't point out, but we'll talk about it on the next strip, was I really honored those last few strips as I came through. So back to just basic quilt construction, the next thing I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna press away from the center block. Okay, so we're constantly pressing away from our work. And right now you can see that our block is really darn accurate. There might be maybe 2 threads long on one end, and that's okay. We're just going to account for that as we put on our next piece. All of these blocks are created the same in their orientation, and so when I was doing them, I really did. I just looked at Jackie's pattern, and I looked right here at the square, and then I just started on the bottom. So now we're gonna build over to my left-hand side. Okay, so the next strip will be bigger than the first strip we started with, and I've pre-chosen my colors so that I'm not duplicating many colors next to each other. And now we're gonna go ahead and sew this piece on. Okay, so as I do this, the other thing that helps me is I like to keep the bulk or the weight on the bed of the machine. So as I keep adding on, the large piece of quilt stays on the feed dogs for travel. So now I'm gonna come back in, I'm gonna find that same 1/4 inch seam allowance, go ahead and sewing down. And that second tip I was trying to point out a moment ago was a lot of times as we get towards the end, maybe we can't hold our fingers or whatnot, but I really wanna make sure those last few stitches stay straight. If you let go right there, a lot of times the fabric will start to shift, and that's gonna give a little bit of a veer on those last 3 or 4 stitches. So when you press open, let's do that. When you press open your block, a lot of times it looks really nice and straight, and that last little bit kind of curves, and you can see that your block is not, you know, running square like we want them to. Okay, so that's just a little bit of basic quilting construction for all of our new quilters out there, because I love having you join me here at So Well to learn. Back to the actual construction of the block, and let's just point this out again. Random is really key, as you can see with a lot of the blocks, but we're just building on as we go now, kind of stair-step fashion, okay? So if we already put that one on, now the next one's gonna go right across here. This one is the same width as this one because of the add-on. So again, I'm just gonna grab this piece right here and I'm gonna stitch it on, making sure again that I'm nice, lined up, all the corners coming through. Watching that same exact seam allowance over and over again. That really is one of the keys to becoming a more accurate quilt maker, is just getting dialed into your sewing machine, your foot, and understanding what to be looking at while you're doing your patchwork. We're gonna add 4 strips to both sides, so a total of 8 strips go onto the square, right? So I'm gonna start picking up the pace and dropping these pieces down, because we're gonna need, like I said, as you look at the major quilt, 36 of these half log cabin units to form the mountains and the plains within. So I'm gonna keep sewing these through so that I have that and I can bring you all together at the next step. So now you can see I actually have the last strip on as I head on over to the iron. And now basically you're ready. Once you have all 36 of these blocks, you could start the layout of your center of the quilt, if you want to call it that. So I'm just kind of thinking in this bottom corner, and basically I kind of see this like a J unit. And then so we're going to start with one like this, and then the key for the whole layout is then the next block is going to go in here like this opposite. So they're kind of touching, so they make sure your square then touches the strips. The next one will come in here opposite like this, getting a little bit crowded for space within my little studio here, but that's the way you're gonna lay them out, 6 by 6. going all the way through, making sure that you're having a nice random color layout, whether you're working scrappy or you're working from one of our wonderful kits provided at Stitchin Heaven. So those are the first sets of units. Once you get that center put together, you have a little bit of binding, a little bit of an interior border. Let's get these terms right today, right? So you have an interior border that you can see that goes on all four sides of the quilt. Now the next part is the exterior border, which is super cool. It's coming together with two different pieces. We're gonna start to put triangles together like this, and then when we get to the very end, we have cornerstones, which are gonna be formed by our traditional half square triangle. A lot of you are comfortable with that, so we'll save that till the end of the video. So let's talk about how we got to this wonderful border, and I wanna talk about putting in some of the other pieces as well. So first of all, one of the things that the pattern calls for is you have some longer strips, like 21 inches by the little skinny strips, right? And Jackie's asked us to sew 7 of them together. Now what I did to make my life easy, because you know I love tools, and if you love tools, you should have a lot of them like me. But I took the template and I looked at the template provided within the pattern, and then I went ahead and I went over to my wall and I noticed that my Creative Grids ruler, and let me make sure I'm saying this right, when I laid it in there, that's what I remembered exactly, was 6.5 when it fit right in here, not remembering that that tip was cut off there. So my 6.5 is the template piece that I was looking for, and then this is actually a 7 when you're cutting with the Creative Grids. So these pieces within here, on these strips, we're gonna cut at 6.5 inches. So let me show you that now, because there's a couple of cool tricks. Now, coming to this side again, as I have a straight edge, I can actually find the 6.5 inch line along this bottom here, okay? Go ahead and cut that tip. As you can see, my triangles are getting a random or different look. So you need 7 of these stripped triangles or striped triangles per side, so that's 28 of those. And then we also in the pattern are called to make some of the strips of our background fabric, and I was cutting both the full triangles like you see, same size, and these half triangles. But some of you may have not sewn triangles together, upsy downsies, so let me show you how all that works as well, so you have a real good grip on how to patch all of this together. So let's just keep adding. No, let me show you the first step is first, okay? And then we can add on if we need. So with this here, what I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna bring my next triangle in, okay? And I have basically, like I said, an up and a down facing. So as I lay these over right sides together, not only am I watching this line, but I'm actually watching this line and this line. So the first 2 triangles are very simple to sew together. Match them up completely and then do a 1/4 inch along this side here. Do watch out for those seams, because the stripped triangle now has the patchwork facing in one direction, but this is very crucial that you do this following Jackie's pattern, because she's figured out all the math so everything works out perfect and we don't have any partial triangles or partial squares or partial cornerstones. This quilt is very accurately engineered. Like with all my patchwork, I really want to press after each one, but because I have parts and pieces and a standard piece of fabric or a solid piece of fabric, I'm now going to press into the solids even though it is the lighter color. So we're just pressing over that way, okay? And then I'm going to grab another triangle to insert it. Now as I flip it over, same thing, okay? I'm watching this straight line, and I'm also watching the upper straight line. You're gonna see these little corners hanging over everywhere, but this is the faith in quilting. Trust that it will work, it will. And that's one of the reasons I also like those Creative Grids rulers, is they have that tip taken off, so it does help a little bit with alignment at times. Now you can see I'm managing those actual seam allowances from the top, which makes the stitching even easier. That's what I was referring to on the bottom a moment ago. Okay, and now as we come over to our ironing surface, I'm going to again press into the light or the background fabric. And I'd like to point out that we have a nice straight line and a nice straight line with a 1/4 inch seam allowance right there. So this is coming together very, very nicely. And if I wanted to add on one of the half triangles, that's the ending unit. This is going to go on before the half square triangle goes on. Same kind of thing, right? This is going to go along this diagonal. As I fold it over, what I've learned to do, not only am I watching this outside line, but look, if you can see the bleed through of that seam allowance, I'm actually laying the straight edge along that seam allowance right there. And I know it sure feels like there's a lot of those corners hanging over, but it's gonna work. I'm gonna start up here where I have a little bit more bulk, keep things going accurately. And again, that same 1/4 inch we've been using all day. It is quilt making. We're just going to line those up real nice and easy. So that when this part presses over, again, you can see I've got a really nice straight line going there, a little bit extra that can be trimmed off as we're adding in. So you'll go ahead and build out your outer border rows, like I said, using 7 of these stripped triangles or striped triangles per side, so 28 of those. And then at the end, you need 4 randomly colored half square triangles. And if you're, like I said, new to quilting, this is a half square triangle unit here. Okay, the pattern asks us to make squares first off like this. And now we're just going to draw a diagonal line. On this one, we're just going to cut a line. So we're just going to take this. So one square is going to be cut and matched up with different colors, so 4 different random colors, right? And as we get ready to put these together, I thought this was kind of fun, by the way. I had the same batik, just in a different shade that was in the kit. I don't know if you all picked up on that. Pretty cool. That's from Island Batik, because Jackie Kunkel is a designer for Island Batik, so all of the batiks there are from them. Anyway, sorry, I got distracted. What I wanted to point out now is we're just laying the 2 triangles nice and even together, okay? This is not a fancy half square triangle technique. This is 2 triangles, so you want to be very careful not to stretch on any of your bias. You're sewing along the longer side of the triangles, the hypotenuse, that's the word everybody loves. And we're just going to sew nice and slow and steady. If you've never heard me say it, I have my stitch length to a 2.0 instead of 2.5 because it's just a little bit less pull on my fabric for these bias. Okay, came all the way through there. And I said Jackie Kunkel was my new best friend, and she really is, but I also have a new best tool as well. This is a slotted trimmer, and I'm just gonna grab this real quick and make myself a 6.5 inch half square triangle by using this. I'm laying out the markings on the slotted trimmer on the sewing line. And now as I take this, I can go ahead and cut all the way through, carefully cut the dog ears off as well. And what that did for me is it cut all 4 sides. It trimmed it all down perfectly accurately. So now with these, I will come over and press into the colored side or the darker printed side of the fabric. So like I said, you need to have 4 of these half square triangles made. So there's our other one. We're going to do this for pretend, let you all use your imaginations today. So there's that, and that. Those are put in as the cornerstone. So technically you put on your short borders first without the half square triangles, and then the long borders you add the half square triangles to the end as you're putting them in, and these colored pieces all point into the quilt, wrapping it up and finishing this beautiful Mountains and Plains by Jackie Kunkel. Now, there's something else I want to talk about a little bit. I think it's really important, and we don't spend enough time on this show, I don't think, discussing the actual free motion or the machine quilting. So Jackie sent me this quilt. She made this quilt herself in her studio, and she's a long arm quilter, but this style of stitching could be done by a long arm or seated at a domestic. Okay, if you look closely, the stitching is basically a gradient curve or a gradual curve, aka straight line quilting. Probably could have been done with a walking foot if you really wanted to. What I love about this quilting though is there are sections where it gets narrow and then it gets wide and then it gets narrow. So the further you are away from this quilt, the more you see the movement within the quilting stitching itself. And I do find that's really important in quilting to try to add a little extra part to your story. So this quilt is very linear, very square with our wonderful half log cabin blocks and our triangle blocks that are 60-degree triangles, right? So a nice soft curved quilting stitch really lends to the eye and softens it down. It's like that horizon, gives us a resting place, something that we can really appreciate outside of the color and the design elements in the quilt. So machine quilting here, edge to edge, so to speak, in a really nice soft flowing motion, matching neutral colored whitish gray thread. Very, very simple, and I know all of you can accomplish this on your very, very own. The binding was put on with the same neutral background fabric, and if you have the kit, you've got everything you need in there, including Jackie's wonderful pattern. So as I wrap it up today, I just really want to say thank you to Jackie Kunkel. You are wonderful. I appreciated so much spending the time with you doing the interview and seeing your home studio and meeting your quilt inspectors. You are awesome, my friend. Thank you so much for sharing this quilt with all of us, and I can't wait to see you on one of the quilting cruises and the retreats out in Quitman at Stitchin Heaven. So thank you, Jackie, for being with us remotely today, in spirit today, in quilting today, and everybody else, we'll see you very soon with another fabulous tutorial. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. It really helps support our channel. If you haven't subscribed, do so now. Hit the little button to be notified every time we go live or do a new video for all of you. And here's one from the past I think you'll really enjoy.